Now to welcome you to Driven 2020 is BP3's CEO, Scott Francis.
Let me unmute myself. Most famous comment in 2020. Can you hear me now? So thank you, Krista. Welcome to Driven 2020, everyone, for day two. As you know, Driven is 5 days of some of the best minds in automation, talking about the 5 key themes that we see in the automation market: artificial intelligence, RPA, or robotic process automation, general process automation, application modernization, and enterprise user experience design. And really excited to share the content with you today that we're going to discuss. I encourage you to join the Slack domain that Krista mentioned, because it's always great to have the sort of informal banter while the session's going on or afterward. And I know David and the other folks who join us will be available for Q&A in Slack afterward as well. Also, you might have noticed that the new Forrester Wave for digital process automation service providers Q3 2020 was released just last week. If you didn't notice, allow me to call your attention to it. If you go to our website at www.bp3.com, bp-3.com, you can find a link to register and download that report in full. We are really honored, our team is really honored to be included in the evaluation, and even more so to be named a leader in this wave. And when you choose to work with BP3, you're choosing to work with the best at what we do. And this kind of recognition really only comes with working with amazing clients, team members, and partners. And let me just say thank you once again. Really, really excited for our team. And finally, we are ready to start day two, focused on RPA, robotic process automation, the hottest of hot areas in enterprise software. But how do we make the most of it and get the most value out of the hype cycle? Well, let's find out, shall we? I will hand it off to David Brakonecki, who runs our European business. David, take it away. Everyone else, enjoy Driven 2020, day two.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Just give me a second to get the screen sharing working. There we go. I'm very excited to host the RPA Day and to bring you through. I think we've gathered together some great content for you today. I'm going to begin and end the day talking a little bit about the current state as we see it from a BP3 perspective of the RPA market. I'm going to end the day talking about some of the things we think and some of the future directions of the RPA market as we see them. In between that, though, is the bits I'm probably really excited about. We have a great panel of some of our RPA customers at various different stages of their journeys and different levels of maturity. And we have a good demo for some of the concepts that both we talked about yesterday on the RPA Day and how they fit into the RPA environment, as well as some of the new concepts I'll talk about in the current state. So without further ado, shall we get started? It used to be, when we talked about RPA at Driven, that we really had to define the term because it was sort of a niche technology 3 or 4 years ago. I've sort of left this slide in to make sure and level set that everyone knows what we're talking about. So RPA, when we talk about it, we talk about types of software that are emulating the way human beings do repetitive tasks. They're largely designed to free up employees from performing higher value work. Probably the best way I think about I've found to explain RPA to people who don't understand it is it's basically an integration technology, but it uses the same UI that human beings use. So it types in the same fields that you as a user use. It clicks on the same buttons, and because of that, you don't need. It has several interesting dimensions as an enterprise software product. One of the most notable dimensions of it is that because it uses the software tools and applications the same way end users do, that business users quite often understand how precisely the technology works in a way that they don't when you're writing code that's accessing an API. And that has some interesting dynamics about the way business and tech can work together on RPA products. But perhaps we'll stop there for a second. And before we kick off into the main content, let's start with a poll. So. think you can probably see there that you know, inside this group, 75%, unsurprisingly, you've come to an automation conference, are using RPA in your business today. And I mean, that's pretty much a very popular trend we see now. Again, RPA is, as Scott said, the hottest of the hot in automation today. It's one of the top technologies people are asking us about, or asking us to help them figure out where it fits into their overall architecture. So, if I step back from that and maybe just start with how does the RPA market look? So these are some numbers from the Everest Group. There are a research consultancy that specialize a lot in RPA. Estimated 2020 market size between $2 and $2.5 billion, with a 70 or 80% compound annual growth rate over the last 3 years. Pretty startlingly fast numbers. It's a pretty big market. The growth rates in particular are impressive. I mean, I think in 2019, Gartner said that RPA was the fastest growing sector of all enterprise software. And it's a big market, but also if you look across the vendors in the various regions they have listed here, it's also a fairly stable market, right? There is a big three vendor set: Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and Blue Prism. That's the majority of the market. That's where the center of gravity in the market is. You have another set of vendors, WorkFusion, Pega, NICE in particular, maybe, that really have specific characteristics or qualities which make them incredibly attractive to certain types of customers. But there's a long tail of customers, and even since this research came out 6 months ago or so, you see some of these vendors on the slides in front of you here. Another Monday, Softmotive, were both acquired and no longer exist. But this market view, and I guess around this, this is the software market, the professional services, and the other ancillary markets which you'd expect to surround sort of an enterprise software product and ecosystem. They all exist, and they sort of operate at the same levels that you'd expect. Certainly the RPA professional services market isn't quite at 3 to 5 times the software, but that's normal, and it's sort of trending there. It certainly appears as if it'll stabilize at about that level. But inside this tidy view, what's kind of interesting is that this tidy view is hardly ever how people come to RPA, or increasingly come to us to ask about how the RPA market works. Because RPA is actually part of a bigger automation market. And in this context, inside this bigger automation market, where you have workflow technology, case management solutions, you have things like MuleSoft, which you can use to do integration and can solve some of the same use cases. You have open source tools, and you have commercial platforms. You have consolidated vendors like Pega and IBM, who have products across almost all the areas of automation, all the way down to sort of, on the other end of the spectrum, applications like Microsoft and AWS, which might provide only one service on the AWS platform, which could be qualified really as automation, but still as a player in this overall market. The automation market space for technology is a very confused place. And RPA is one part of it. So increasingly, the challenge that businesses have isn't just, should I buy RPA, or how does RPA fit into my enterprise architecture? Increasingly, the challenge, and particularly in the pandemic, with the pressure COVID is putting on all of our businesses, the challenge is, I want more efficiency, I want to be more effective, and I feel like I need to bring automation, and my competitors are bringing automation into their businesses. And how do I do that? Well, when you're talking about how to bring automation into your business, you're not looking at this really tidy, nicely organized RPA market with sort of leaders and followers and different technology capabilities that's growing at a nice tidy CAGR. You're looking at this bigger, messy automation market, and for most organizations, you are already going to own some of the tools on this slide. So you're going to also be grappling with questions like, should I use the thing I own, which isn't the perfect technology fit for the use case I have, or should I go and buy a new technology? And should I pick something else off the menu of automation technology, as it were? And that's a question we've seen, and we've been consistently trying to help our customers with over the last 2 or 3 years. And to help them, we've worked through a automation categorization, a way to think about that model, to reason through it, and to classify and group things. The core of it is what you see here: task flow and decisions. That's the core, core of that categorization. And the first thing I'd say to you when you look at this and you think about the categorization model this way is the automation. We haven't put technologies up there. I haven't written BPM or case management systems or ticketing systems. I haven't written RPA solutions or integration tools. One of the keys to the categorization method is, rather than starting with the technology, let's start with the use cases. And there's two good reasons for that. One is, if you understand the problem, you can understand and make sure you're finding the right solution. But the second is that as soon as you, when you go to the business users, when they say we need to automate in the shared service center, you can talk to them using this framework. You can find the use cases, but you can and after you get the use cases, you can then apply technology. These use cases, this terminology should be things which business users can adapt to. You don't have to teach them what robotics are. You don't have to teach them that some task use cases are robotics use cases and others are ones that you should script with Ansible. You can deal with that offline. The most important thing, the first indication of being successful in any new automation program, find the right use cases. Find use cases which are going to make a real difference to your business. So if you think about how to reason through these, we start with task automations. So what's a task automation? Routine work, normally work done by one person in one sitting. It's data entry. Usually data entry, it can be part of a more complicated task. It's often rekeying the same data into multiple systems, or taking data that's in one system and then having to rekey it into another system. You find it, it's easy. Normally you can find it anytime you have people keying into multiple systems is a good place. If you have large spreadsheets, Word documents that are being used to store information because you're talking to a customer on the phone and you can't key it into the three systems all at the same time. So you write it down on a piece of paper or you type it into a notepad on the side. And then after that call, you then actually finish up and type all the data into all the different systems. That's a task automation to fix. Reporting, if someone is manually compiling Excel reports, pulling data from multiple systems, putting them in Excel, reformatting that Excel spreadsheet, that's a task automation. That's a task automation use case. The business case and the ROI around task automation is normally done by measuring working hours saved. What you're doing is someone has a routine part of their job and they're keying a bunch of data and moving data around your systems. The human is being the integration, swivel chair integration, and you're replacing them with a robot. That human does 50% of their job is routine manual work. If you replace that with a robot, you save half an FTE. You can then repurpose that. You can rationalize your headcount, or you can repurpose that person to higher value work, retrain them, and reallocate them to other places in your organization. There are some task automations, obviously. What you find when you do task automation, though, is sometimes the business case around task automation is built on compliance. Certainly, if you have you're in a regulated industry and you're typing a lot of data into your systems, what you'll find is human beings are actually really bad, even at copying and pasting. Hitting Control-C, Control-V all day. They're gonna copy the wrong data. They're gonna miss the last vowel or the first vowel on the thing on a name when they copied it from one system to another. They're gonna misspell something when they type between two different systems. Robots don't. Robots will always copy the data with 100% integrity. If you've written the code right, you've tested the code, and the RPA bot, it will move it. So you can often, with task automation, see a dramatic reduction in error rate. And that's another way that in task automation, you can make a strong business case around investing in this kind of technology. The second technology that we talk about in the automation market is flow. And flow technology is orchestration of work across different participants or silos. It's constructed, the work is always constructed of several tasks. If you come from a workflow background or a case management background, if you have a Lean Six Sigma background, flow is the technology which you're using to orchestrate your end-to-end value chains. It's a very different looking for flow opportunities than looking for tasks. So if task opportunities, one of the best ways to find a pool of use cases around task automation is look for big labor groups. Do you have 20 or 30 people doing the same job? If you have 100 people doing the same job and I can automate 1% of that person's job, I can save you an FTE worth of labor. Flow automation is you're looking not for large labor groups, but you're looking for lots of handoffs, lots of work being passed between different SMEs or different specialists. And it's in those handoffs that work gets lost. It sits in my email inbox, waiting for my approval, or I send it off to my boss and he's on holiday and he doesn't get to it in a timely fashion, and I end up missing the SLA across the whole process. So that orchestration, instead of looking for large labor groups all doing the same job as we do with task automation, with flow automation, you tend to find the best use cases where you have very small labor groups which hand the work off between them. If you have teams which are geographically separated but doing the same job, those are often great use cases where you definitely find task automation. What you'll probably find is that one group in one office is working full time, and the other group has spare capacity. If you could just balance the work between the two, if you could see it between the two, you could balance the work, you could hit your SLAs better, you could reduce wait times on the end-to-end value stream. So flow automation, very different dynamics. Another good indicator of where to find flow automation is really around if you're using spreadsheets or email to send tasks to people or to track work that's being done, normally because your core system of records, your ERP system, is not configured or customized correctly. So you're working around it, and therefore you're keeping track of things in a spreadsheet, and you're spreading that spreadsheet around the team to figure out who has what job so you can make your SLA. That's a great use case for putting flow automation in, for tracking that work, for understanding it, making sure you hit those deadlines. The final category of automation in space is decision automation. And really, this is what Tom and Chris were talking about yesterday. It's using rules or using technology to simulate human judgment, right? And there's a couple real ways that that decision automation really drives a business case if you're looking for examples of where to start or where to find these kinds of use cases. One of them is if you have to make technologies, decisions, humans have to make judgment at scale and at speed, right? It used to be all insurance and bank was manually underwritten. You'd call up and an underwriter you'd talk to someone, you'd fill out a questionnaire, it would go to a human being who'd make an underwriting decision. In the old Lloyd syndicates, they'd sign it with a quill pen. But obviously, when you move to a modern world, you buy insurance online, you buy it through the internet. The technology, the pricing engine makes a decision about who's eligible for insurance, what the price of that insurance is. And that happens really in real time, right? So when you need to make decisions quickly and at scale, then obviously you need some sort of decision technology behind that. But another good use case for simulating human judgment is just looking for opportunities where you need consistency in judgment. So again, if you go to regulatory and compliance, if there's some famous studies in the U.S. where they looked at statistical studies of when people were granted parole given similar characteristics, and what they found was that if you got the judge right after lunch, you're more likely to get parole than right before lunch. So, human beings, even given the same piece of information, being given the same information to reason against, and the same set of guidelines as to how to score that use case or that scenario, they'll come to different judgments based on the fact that they're hungry, they're tired, based on the fact that they're having a good day, they're having a bad day, they got a flat tire on the way to work. Those human judgments, that emotion all affects it. So if you're in a regulated industry, where you have to demonstrate that you make the same decisions, you make these decisions consistently in a fair and unbiased way based on facts, moving much more of the decision service, moving much more of how those decisions are made into technology, figuring out how to embed them in technology. And whether that's a deterministic system or some sort of machine learning or AI is another a really good use case for decision automation. So this sort of framework is a really strong canvas where you can take all of the use cases you have for what kind of automation you want. You can figure out, are you trying to move work around your organization, so you need flow? Are you trying to make work that's one team does more efficient, happen faster, so maybe you need some sort of task automation? Or are you trying to simulate human judgments? Do you need some sort of decision automation? And as you might have figured out as I was talking, underneath each of those, there's some technologies which really match up to them. So obviously RPA is a great fit for task automation, but so is integration, some sorts of integration technology, some scripting languages, depending on what part of your organization you work at. There's a lot of ways you can solve a task automation problem, not just RPA. with Flow, you've got ticketing systems, Zendesk, ServiceNow, workflow systems, IBM, BPM, Pega. You've got case management systems. And in the decision side, you've got all of the AI machine learning, you've got all of the rules engines, but even in some cases, I mean, some of the most effective or highest ROI decision automations were put in place. A nested if-then statement in someone's ERP system. All it did was look at expense approvals and apply some rules about which ones needed a human being to look at to sign off and which ones should automatically go through the system and should just be pre-approved. So this allows you to think about how automation technology works, how the use cases that exist for it, and really, though, it also lets us reason a little bit about the way the general RPA brings some order to that general or that more chaotic automation technology marketplace. Historically, and certainly even today probably, the center of gravity for the automation technology marketplace is this middle category of flow. I mean, if RPA is about 2 billion, workflow alone is about 5 billion, and then you've got ticketing systems and ServiceNow and Zendesk and those types of things on top of that, plus other custom-built applications and things. Decisions, again, probably a bit bigger than tasks today, but not the same size as flow. So from a historical center of gravity standpoint, flow is really, in the overall market, really where the center of gravity, where the sort of, when people talk automation technology, that's most of where they're talking about. RPA obviously sits off on the task side of the equation, unsurprisingly. And this structure also lets us reason a little bit and talk a little bit about the characteristics as you move sort of left to right across the page. So the first thing I'd say is that these are broad generalizations. Everyone's mileage will vary, right? If there's ever a slide designed to start a tech flame war in the Slack channel, it's probably this one. The first thing I'd start is maybe the bottom row, right? In our experience, if you find the right use cases and you match the right technology to it, you have an equal chance of achieving a fantastic ROI across any of these technology categories, across any of these types of use cases. But if we reason sort of in broad strokes, if you start over at the task side of the automation category, what you find is that RPA tends to be a smaller initial investment size. It's easier to get, it's a cheaper investment to get started, and it tends to have, and therefore tends to have a quicker payback period. You get your return on your investment faster, and it tends to sort of increase as you go across, right? Again, there's lots of exceptions to all of those rules. I'm talking in broad generalizations, but inside, if you want to put RPA in context, inside why it's getting traction, how it's working, where people are finding places for it in their organization, a lot of it has to do with where it fits in this broad automation. A lot of people want automation, particularly with the pressure the pandemic's putting on their businesses. They feel the need that they have to get some sort of automation in their business. And if you look at this, they want something that has a fast payback period. They don't want it. They want to try to get that payback before they have to announce their annual results. They don't want to have to show to be investing past those annual milestones. So you see, RPA is sort of a good fit for the sign of our times, and it's the natural starting point. If you're coming to automation and a lot of time people who are coming cold to automation and just want to know where to start, it also tends to be the natural starting point. But if that's the current market as we see it today, life moves pretty fast. Technology moves arguably faster. And so there's some big trends which we're seeing in the market today, probably things that if you would have come to this talk 8 months ago, I would say probably both of these things would probably have been at the bleeding edge. And now they're things that we're seeing common in the deployed market, in the install base.
Before you go on to the to trends in RPA today, we have a question in the chat. Can RPA work for all web and desktop-based applications?
Well, you never want to say all, right? I mean, there's always exceptions to the rules, but by and large, particularly if you have direct access to the UIs and the user interface, you should be able to get some sort of RPA to work against them. Working through Citrix is possible, but a lot harder. So if you have use cases where you have a shared service center that's all behind Citrix, if we can get the RPA robots, bot runners installed inside the Citrix environment so they can directly access the applications, the likelihood of it working is a lot greater, working easily with low development time. Working through Citrix, is a lot more computer vision and cool AI stuff that Tom talked about yesterday.